What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Absolute Strength Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Hunt, and today I am back with another book review. Today we're going over the Bulgarian Burst Training System, and I picked this book as the second book to go over, partly because, man, this is for one, it's old. It's old as dirt. It's older than me. This book was written in 1990, so it's actually 1 year older than me. But the real reason, I'm kind of joking there. I mean, yeah, it is old. I turned 28 in October, so this is 29 years old. Old book. I guess it could be considered an old book in training terms, anyways. But the real reason I picked it is I don't hear anybody talk about this book. This book is very rarely brought up. It's actually not even really a book. It's more like it's like a pamphlet. I mean, there's only like 38 pages, and I'm pretty much going to read the entire book to you. I went through and highlighted and wrote notes on sections I want to talk about a little bit in more detail. But for the most part, I'm going to do a lot of reading in this book because, like I said, there's only 38 pages. It's called the Bulgarian Burst Training System, and a lot of good information. I mean, it's written in 1990, so a lot of the stuff is, there's some stuff that's outdated, but the real reason that we're going to dig into this is because I think a lot of people have the idea of what the Bulgarian weightlifting team, what kind of the Bulgarian method. It actually got really popular a few years ago. Super high frequency, multiple training sessions a day, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that's for Olympic weightlifting, weightlifting competition, snatch and clean and jerk. Now, what if you extrapolated that style of training for bodybuilding? What would that look like? And that's essentially what this is. That's what this book is all about. This is a book that was pretty much the Bulgarian method for bodybuilding, I guess you could say. And what's funny is a few years ago, kind of the Bulgarian method got repopularized. A lot of people were talking about it. And Greg Nuckols even wrote a book, The Bulgarian Method for Powerlifting. And, people were kind of, very interested in that. And we're wondering if that was applicable because there's a big difference in how you train for Olympic lifting to powerlifting, and there's even a bigger difference between Olympic lifting and bodybuilding. So you can already kind of tell, there may be some issues here, but we'll dig into that. Before we get into the book, a couple things. One, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to everybody that wrote reviews last week. I know I asked for people to write reviews, and I was going to give away some Absolute Strength t-shirts. I was actually blown away by how many people went and left a review. Thank you so much. So I'm going to give away 5, like I said. Give away 5 shirts. And ideally, like I said last week, I was like, well, shit, if you give a review, you'll probably get a shirt. But I wasn't expecting, I didn't count them, but there's probably at least 20, 25 new reviews. So I just picked the first 5. Just to make it fair, because it was, there was a lot of really good reviews, so I couldn't even go through them and pick the best ones. They were all great, so thank you so much. So the first 5, and if I call your iTunes name, I guess is what it would be. Send me an email, kylehuntfitness@gmail.com, and let me know your address and what size t-shirt you want. So here are the 5 winners. 1, Scotland 360. 2, DJ 43. 3rd winner, Ivy Strength. 4th winner, ABPO Lifts. And then number 5 is Mr. Jet. So those are the 5 winners. If I said your name there, send me an email, kylehuntfitness@gmail.com. We will get you your Absolute Strength Podcast t-shirt sent out to you. And I want to do something else because the response was great. So I'll think on what we can do next because, I want everyone to get rewarded somehow. So give me some time. I'll think, and then we'll run some type of other, it may be iTunes review related or maybe something completely different, but I want to give away more t-shirts. Maybe we'll give away some Absolute Strength programs. I don't know. Want to hook you guys up. And then, of course, when my book comes out in the fall, my real actual hard copy book that will be in Barnes & Nobles and Amazon and whatnot, the publisher is sending me a bunch. Like I'm getting, I don't know, I kind of look at the contract again, but I think I'm getting like 20 to 25 books just because I'm the author, like they're just sending me 20 to 25 books that I'm not supposed to sell or anything. So probably what I'll do is I'll probably sign, I don't know, a few of those, and we'll run some contests in the fall. I'll give away some books to you guys. But before that, we'll do something else too. Also, I think with the book is I can like if that's actually pretty popular and people like getting that, I can even buy more, like at really discounted price, because I'm the author. I can buy like I think 50% off or something. I'm gonna buy a bunch more. So if that's something that's cool and everyone likes that, then shit, I'll probably buy a bunch of those, and we'll kind of use that as a theme going forward. Is like, hey, I'm gonna run a contest. Like, who wants a book? But thank you to everyone who wrote the reviews. And last but not least, before we get into the book, Hit Point, PR Breaker Hit Point, the new protein powder is out. It is shipping right now. So if you didn't take advantage of the pre-order, and you're like, I'll just wait till it comes out. I know. I mean, that's how I am about most things. Like, I don't normally pre-order stuff. I'm like, I'll just wait till it starts shipping. Well, it's shipping right now. So head over to prbreaker.com. Chocolate, vanilla, 2 protein powders. Flavors are amazing. I think you guys are going to really, really like it. Like we've talked about before, it's a milk protein isolate, which is a casein and whey blend. There's a lot of research supporting whey and casein blends being superior to whey alone or casein alone. Perfect for a meal replacement. Great post-workout. Great before bed. Like, it's the best of both worlds. It has fast-acting whey and the slow-released, sustained-released casein. So, great flavors. Yeah, I think you're going to really, really enjoy this. So, prbreaker.com. Go check out Hit Point. Use the discount code HUNT10 to save yourself some money and help support the Absolute Strength Podcast. And last but not least, I said that was going to be the last thing, but like I always say, I'm a coach, guys. If you want to take your training to the next level, let's get started. Let's get working together. KyleHuntFitness@gmail.com. Send me an email. Let's start the conversation, see how we can get your shit going. More information about my coaching is always in the show notes. Click the link for more information. All right, Bulgarian Burst Training Systems. The Bulgarian method for bodybuilding. Is that even possible? Let's find out. So I actually had a funny story on how I got my hands on this book. The year was 2013. I was just out of college, just graduated college. Moved home. Well, I didn't move home. Another funny story is, so I packed up all my shit. The day I graduated, literally walked down, got my diploma. Well, a fake diploma, they mail it to you, but walked up, got my fake diploma, left the arena, wherever it was at school. I can't remember. I think it was in the arena, or the field house. Went back to my apartment, loaded up the U-Haul, left that night, drove home. Didn't even unpack anything. Spent the night at my parents' house, and then the next morning, I'm like, I'm going to wake up. The following morning, I had a couple apartments I wanted to look at because I wanted to, didn't want to stay at home for very long. First apartment I went and looked at. I loved it. I fell in love. I'm like, cool. When can I sign the lease? When can I move in? And for whatever reason, they were just like, well, you can sign it today and like move in now. I'm like, well, shit, we'll just do that then. So I signed the lease, went back to my parents, I didn't even unpack the U-Haul. Just took the U-Haul, drove it over to the new apartment. And I mean, when I joke about it, I say I always spent one night in my parents' house after I moved away from college, but I might have spent 2. I think I stayed at least 2 nights. But yeah. Anyway, so I started training at this gym, Diamond Gym. It was, about 20 minutes from that new apartment. I trained there before. Actually, there's some old training videos on my YouTube channel of me training there. And I don't know, a couple weeks in, one of the guys there, one of the older guys they're working out around the same time I was, came up to me and he was like, hey, have you ever heard of the Bulgarian Burst Training System? He's like, you look like you're pretty serious about training. Have you ever heard of it? And, I was like, well, I've heard of, how the Bulgarians train. They're kind of infamous for Olympic weightlifting. I mean, everyone knows the Bulgarian method and how successful the Bulgarian weightlifting team has been. But no, I mean, I can't say I've ever heard of the Bulgarian Burst Training System. And he's like, well, it's a book. And he's like, oh, it's the best way to train. He's like, if you're interested in building muscle, like this is the shit. This is what you should be doing. And I was like, okay, well, cool. I mean, guy was in decent shape. He was in decent shape, and looked like he'd been around for a while. Looked like he knew what he was talking about. And hey, I love reading shit. And this is kind of a side point here, but I think sometimes people are quick to say, oh, it's probably bullshit, I don't want to read it. Me, I'm kind of the opposite. I was then, and I still am now. Like, I'll give anything a chance. I'll read anything, even if it sounds stupid. I'll read 10 pages at least. I'll give anything 10 pages. Now, if it's ridiculous and dumb, then I'm not going to waste my time with it, but I'll give anything 10 pages. And sometimes if I don't agree with something, I'll even give it more, just because I think it's smart to constantly, give yourself information that you don't always agree with. I think sometimes people avoid that, but it's not good. But anyway, so I was, okay, cool, yeah. He's like, I'll bring it in for you to read. Probably the next day I saw him at the gym. He had this little booklet, and I took it home, and I read it. Now, I don't know if he was just letting me borrow it or was giving it to me or what, but I don't know. I don't think I ever saw him at the gym again. Now, I think I only ended up training there a couple weeks, and I ended up switching gyms, so that's probably why. If he's listening to this right now, he probably wants this shit back, but I still have it. The Bulgarian Burst Training System. I read it that night, and I was like, shit, this is kind of wild. It's kind of crazy. Doesn't completely make a lot of sense, but I could see why it would be beneficial, or I could see why people who could make it through it would make some gains, I guess what I'm trying to say is, because it's pretty serious. It's pretty serious training. We'll get into what the details are, but I just remember thinking back then, I was like, damn, this is like definitely outside the box from anything that you would really, from a bodybuilding standpoint, it was definitely outside the box thinking, but not crazy outside the box. That's the thing. Like, when you just look at this, you'd say, oh, wow, this it's not very applicable to bodybuilding, or it's kind of just way out in left field. But then when you break it down, it's not really as crazy as it seems on paper. So, all right, let's dig into this. So first off, let's talk about who actually wrote this book. The guy's name is Leo Costa Jr. And he's like the main author, and then the co-author is Dr. Russell L. I don't know how you really pronounce this. Horny, I think. But anyway, so Leo Costa Jr. is pretty much just a strength coach. I mean, he was a certified strength and conditioning specialist, and the doctor, his co-author, Dr. Russell L. Horny, he was a chiropractor. So, I mean, hey, nothing against chiropractors, but I will say, I don't know what it is about chiropractors, but they tend to be, if anybody in the medical community is going to be behind something out in left field, it's probably a chiropractor. But, so just kind of set the scene here a little bit. So Costa he's just a strength coach. And how this book came about was he took a trip to Bulgaria. So to the book. In the summer of 1988, I went to Bulgaria as part of an official delegation of American strength coaches and sports scientists. We went there to find the answer to these two burning questions. Question number 1. Why have the Bulgarians suddenly emerged as the world champions of weightlifting in the last few years? And number 2, how did they get so strong that nobody else even comes close? So he went to Bulgaria. He wanted to find out why the Bulgarians are kicking everybody's ass in weightlifting. Because Bulgaria is a small country too, so I mean it's not like they have a big population to choose from. But he wanted to find this out. And what's funny, you gotta take this. So this was the summer of 1988. Wrote the book in 1990. What's the first thing that kind of sticks out to you right here? This is a pre-internet age. So if you wanted to find out information, you had to go directly to the horse's mouth, so to speak. Like, you had to go over to Bulgaria to find out how the Bulgarians are training. This is pre-internet. And just to kind of think of this big picture is, man, pre-internet, it had to have been so easy to fall for bullshit. So easy. Because just think of, just the mass amount of information that's available to us today that wasn't available to people in 1988. So pretty much, let's say, just think of the idea of how myths could get started. Like, let's say there's this, we won't even talk countries. Let's say you live in the East Coast and you hear about some dude who's really, really strong on the West Coast. And he's like a powerlifting champion on the West Coast. You've never seen him train. You've never even seen him at a competition before. All you've maybe read his name in like a magazine or just heard about how he's kicking everyone's ass in powerlifting. You'd have really no idea what he was doing in the gym. You know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't have his Instagram. You wouldn't be following him on Instagram, seeing what he's posting. He wouldn't have a YouTube channel going over what he's eating during the day and what his lifestyle's like and what his training sessions are. Wouldn't have none of that. Wouldn't even have a forum to post a training log. You wouldn't know anything. All you would know is, what people said about his training. Because he probably wouldn't tell you. So people would go train with him or something, and they'd come back and say, oh, yeah, so this is what he was doing. Or maybe they did like an interview with him or something, and they would say, oh, this, he would put down what his program is or whatever. But what I'm trying to get at is you wouldn't actually ever see them train. So you could you would believe anything. Like, I think he could say he was doing anything. And since you weren't watching it, he wasn't documenting it on social media, you would have no real evidence to show one way or the other. I think this used to happen a lot in the bodybuilding magazines. You'd have a couple issues. One is a lot of times when they would post bodybuilders, quote unquote bodybuilding programs in these bodybuilding magazines, like, oh, this is the Mr. Olympia's program. Well, a lot of times the Mr. Olympia wasn't even writing it. I'm talking like early 90s here. Like, it wasn't like, these guys, the Olympia competitors were sitting down and writing down exactly what they did. They didn't even write it. It was ghostwritten by one of the people who worked for the magazine, which that was probably the case most of the time. Or B, they just kind of like put like something random down, like, oh yeah, this is what I do. But it wasn't like they actually went into the gym and wrote down exactly sets, reps, weight, what they did for the last month, and then put that together in the program. It wasn't like you were getting that. You were just kind of getting a list of exercises that may or may not have actually been their program. But hey, that was all the information you had, so that's what you went and ran with. Even in the past, like books like Purposefully Primitive by Marty Gallagher, he wrote that book, and he talked about a lot of former powerlifting and bodybuilding and strongman programs in the past and what the elite guys were doing. Like, he talked about Ed Cohn and a few other guys. And that book's really cool, but what's funny is he trained with all these guys, so he actually had a firsthand knowledge. Whereas, I can't remember when that book came out, but a lot of the guys were older guys, so like in the 70s, 80s, 90s, so again, pre-internet, you would have literally had to have trained with them, like Marty did, to know the information. Because a lot of times, it would have been hard. Let's say he just wanted to write the book, but he never trained with these guys. What would be the motivation for those guys to tell you what they were doing? He's like, oh, yeah, so I'm going to write a book. Tell me what your training was like. They'd be like, well, why do I want to tell you what I'm doing? You'd have to be kind of have an in with them. So I'm kind of like beating around the bush here, but I'm trying to set the scene and why the guy who wrote this book, going to Bulgaria, like it was like a big deal. That was where this book originated from. It wasn't him writing about what he thought or heard about the Bulgarian system. He actually went to Bulgaria and saw it firsthand. Back to the book. Indeed, this was an unprecedented event. For the first time in history, Western trainers were allowed to go inside the most sensitive Bulgarian sports facilities, which are normally off-limits to outsiders, and learn all about the Bulgarians' latest training methods. We attended lectures given by their top scientists. We interviewed their coaches. We were also allowed to watch their athletes while they trained. It was an incredible experience, one I'll never forget, and I consider myself very fortunate to have been there. We think of countries behind the Iron Curtain as being backward compared to us. Well, in some ways they are, but in many ways they are not. When it comes to sports, these countries have proved that they are tough competitors in the Olympics. The Bulgarians swept the weightlifting titles, yet the winners were much smaller people. The average Bulgarian man is 5'9" and only 150 pounds. The Russians took the judo championships away from the Japanese, even though the Orientals created and have practiced the sport for several hundred years. Why is this? You'll probably be surprised, but it has to do with politics. The communists believe that superiority in sports proves they are superior in other things. Beating the Americans, Germans, and Japanese is very important to them. Consequently, the communist government provides unlimited technological support to their Olympic athletes. All right, so really what we're talking about here is communist countries, Bulgaria, Russia, etc., providing a lot of assistance towards their athletes. Continued. In making the Bulgarians world champion weightlifters, they put their best scientists to work determining how the body builds power, strength, and large muscles. The weightlifters were hooked up to very high-tech instruments to monitor every part of their bodily functions when they worked out. Literally hundreds of experiments were done over several years to determine what worked best and what doesn't. They were laboratory guinea pigs. Careful, exact measurements were recorded on computerized devices. Diets were carefully monitored and controlled. Body chemistry was tracked 24 hours per day. One athlete told me he felt like the bionic man because of all the wires and devices attached to his body at all times. This part's really interesting here. Every natural and synthetic vitamin, hormonal substance, and herb known to have performance or muscle enhancement were tested in a multitude of combinations, dosages, and administration times. So here's the real key. This is the real key. Every natural and synthetic, let me highlight that, and synthetic vitamin and hormonal substance was used. So we just got to mention this. We got to get this out in the open. And this is important when we're talking about the Bulgarians in general. And the Russians too. I mean, when you watch the movie Icarus, I mean, it was state-sponsored. So by the country, state-sponsored doping protocols, so drug enhancement protocols, issued by the state. And this was shown in the documentary. So here's the real key. So when we look at the Bulgarians and we look at like their methods and, oh man, why are they so good? Well, yeah, they do have a unique training method, and there's a lot to be said for that being that working well for them. But hey, we really have to admit the other part too. Like, okay, yes, they do a very high volume, high frequency, well, not really high volume, but super high frequency program. They do a lot of work. They do a ton of work, okay? But they were on steroids. They were on drugs. Absolutely were on drugs. And their entire life was built around training. Like, they were guinea pigs in laboratories. So their whole life, their diet, their rest, everything was optimized, the best of their ability. You know, they didn't have jobs. They didn't have families. They didn't have a bunch of other responsibilities, aka stress in their life, which is very important. I mean, their life was training. And there's something to be said for that. So then when you extrapolate that style of training to your average person, another thing, the people who finally made it to actually train in the Bulgarian Olympic training facilities, I mean, they were the genetic elite too. Like, it wasn't like it was everybody. They started when they were young, and then they whittled their way to when you got to the point when you were into their program. I mean, training for the Olympics, I mean, you're the cream of the crop. So you take steroids, the genetic elite, your diet optimized to the best of the ability, your whole lifestyle optimized to the best of their ability to perform at Olympic weightlifting, and you take the program that they're doing and put too much of an emphasis on that being the reason that they're so successful, but then more so, if you take the program and then apply that to somebody who is average genetics, is natural, not on steroids, has a 40-hour-a-week job, a wife, 2 kids, stress, mortgage, all this other shit, and say, okay, yes, we're going to train 5 times a day. Good luck. For one, it's not even practical. Can't even do it. But 2, let's just say you could replicate the amount of training volume and intensity that they're doing. You're probably not going to get the same results. All right, so keep that in mind. the steroid thing is interesting because the next section, it gets good here. Knowing they could no longer get away with steroids as they had in the past, the communist government gave top priority to their biologists, nutritionists, and chemists to come up with a proven superior nutrition and training formula that would make them winners in the Olympics. They spent billions, literally billions of dollars were spent on research and development for this project. Imagine if the American government gave that type of attention to our bodybuilders and weightlifters. No wonder why the Bulgarians won so easily. All right, so this is what they were doing. They were trying to figure out the key, the substitute for steroids. That explains it. Shit, man, I made such a big deal about them being on steroids this entire time, but no, they were just coming up with a substitute for steroids. All right, so I think it's a touch naive. Just a touch naive to think that that's what they were doing. That's what all this research was for? Shit, that's what they spent billions of dollars? I think they were spending billions of dollars to come up with the best training and nutrition programs in conjunction with also steroid research too. Like, hey, let's just find out what the best drugs are too. Let's find that out because, let's try to figure out what won't get tested. Let's try to find out how to beat the test. It'd be naive to think that they didn't still use. Obviously the Icarus documentary, we're talking about two different countries here, but steroids, it's naive to think that people aren't using steroids just because there's a drug test. That's what I'm trying to say. Not anything specific to Bulgaria. It's just, hey, if there's a drug test, doesn't mean it's natural, just means it's tested. So billions of dollars were spent on research. Okay. All right, so why did they give them their secrets then? That's probably what you're thinking. You're like, well, shit, if they spent billions of dollars on doing all this research to get this information in the 80s, and it's only 1988, why would they give the Americans the research? Why would they give them information? All right, so really what they wanted was credit. That's what it turns out they wanted. The Bulgarians actually wanted the world to know how they became so superior. It was almost like a kid saying, Daddy, look what I did. They were tremendously proud of their accomplishment. They wanted the world to know they were the first to do it scientifically. In giving me their high-tech secrets to bodybuilding techniques and their scientifically proven nutritional formulas, their main concern was that they would get credit for developing them. So they just wanted the credit. Interesting. It's also interesting, he brings up the nutrition side, but they don't talk about nutrition in this book. It's just the training side. Moving on. I had to guarantee that I would publicize that the Bulgarians did it and call this training system the Bulgarian Burst Training System and the Bulgarian Power Nutritional Formula. So he had to give them credit. He had to call it the Bulgarian method, Bulgarian system. I don't know. For some reason, when I read that section, I don't know if that's true or not. It seems interesting. So then he talks about, he talked with all the scientists and stuff like that. And then when he got back to the United States, he immediately put all this new information that he gained from his trip to Bulgaria, and he took all that information and put it to use. He was a strength and conditioning coach. He owned a gym. He worked with a lot of clients. He, even goes on to say here in the book that he has a full-time practice in Southern California where he trains dozens of clients from all walks of life. His clients include professional athletes, Hollywood entertainers, Olympic hopefuls, college football players, and active businessmen. I also have a staff of exercise physiologists and chiropractors who help me design weight training systems for my high school and college football programs. The results were astounding. The results we've witnessed since my return from Bulgaria have amazed everybody, including us. We were already on the cutting edge of weight training and bodybuilding before that, but we have never seen anything like the rapid muscle growth and strength increases that our clients experienced since we put them on the Bulgarian system. Man, it sounds like they might have been on the Bulgarian system more than the training system. It sounds like he might have brought over that Bulgarian supplementation system. Continuing. I truly believe the Bulgarian Burst Training System I'm revealing to you in this manual is the most advanced and most effective weight training bodybuilding system in existence today. The facts speak for themselves, and the results you will experience will speak even louder. Damn, this is some hype. We got the hype going. So to wrap up the introduction, essentially what we're talking about is he went to Bulgaria, talked to their research scientists, talked to their coaches, watched their athletes train, took the information, came back, applied it to his clients, and saw amazing results. A lot of hype, saw good results. Okay, so that was the introduction, kind of the hype building, get you interested, lock you in. Now let's get to the details here. And before we get to the program, there's a lot more details, and we're going to, talk about a lot of different things, but, hold tight. We're going to get to the program, but there's some good information before we actually get to what the training he outlines is. All right, so how to avoid the biggest mistake most bodybuilders make. To the book. One of the most serious problems every bodybuilder in America faces today is that the fact that the sport of bodybuilding is virtually ignored by our country's sports scientists and researchers. The people who should be studying what makes your muscles grow don't consider this subject to be worthy of their time. And so they focus all their attention on performance-oriented sports such as swimming or track. So in 1988 to 1990, this was definitely the case. There was not much research on muscle building. And even in fact, there's not a ton of research on muscle building even in 2019, but there's a lot more. And in recent years, it's become a lot more popular, more research on bodybuilding and powerlifting and body composition and such. Really in the last 20 years, there's been a lot more emphasis in the literature on this kind of stuff. But in 1990, this was absolutely true. There's really, in America, we just weren't studying bodybuilding or really powerlifting, strength, muscle, hypertrophy stuff very much at all. But even today, when we look at it compared to other things, there's still not a lot of research. And this is something I talk about a lot. That's why whenever we're talking about research, we want to talk about the body of evidence. I think sometimes people who are inexperienced and don't really know what they're doing in terms of how to analyze research, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll hang on to like one study. They're like, ooh, I just read this study on whatever it is. Now this is how I'm going to do my training or nutrition for going forward. And it's like, okay, whatever the study was, cool. That was one study. But the interesting thing about research is there needs whenever there's something new, whenever you get like a groundbreaking study, then what happens is, through the scientific processes, people try to duplicate it. They'll say, okay, cool, let me learn from that. Let me investigate further. Let me set up the study a little bit differently, and let's see if I can replicate those results. And then if you can, then more and more research gets compiled, and then you have a body of evidence showing something, whatever it is. That's why when people say, oh, well, you can find research to support anything. Yeah, you can. You can find one research study to almost support anything. That's why one research study alone doesn't tell you much. All it really does is, that's why a lot of times when you hear researchers, if they have a new study that comes out, a lot of times what they'll say is, and even you can, in the discussion of the research paper itself, they'll normally say this, is, oh, cool, this is what we learned, but, here's what we want to investigate further. Here are some things that we want to dig into a little bit more before we can really talk about this in detail and provide a application. We need to research this further. There always needs to be a body of evidence. There always needs to be more than one study to support something. And then that's really what it's all about. We've talked about this numerous times in the podcast, but this is especially true with supplements. Supplements are and that's the thing. There's not a lot of research on performance supplements. There's just really not. There's a few things that we have a lot of research on, or quite a bit of research on, things like creatine, caffeine, the big ones, protein intake. But outside of that, a lot of the other ingredients, there's not a ton of research. And because there's not a ton of research, we unfortunately have to make recommendations on, the research that we have available, which isn't much. So just keep that in mind. But so really what he's talking about here is, hey, in America at the time, in the 80s, we really didn't have a lot of research. But in other countries, specifically the Soviet Union, hey, they were doing study. They were doing research on this. So they were a little bit ahead of us. Back to the book. In the Eastern Bloc countries such as Bulgaria, the Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia, and East Germany, their scientists focused directly on what produces the greatest muscle growth and increases in strength. Naturally, therefore, the Eastern Bloc countries have far surpassed America in every form of weightlifting. Well, all right, two things here. Yes, they were doing more research on performance, but I don't know if they were really doing that much research on muscle building, because really still the best bodybuilders were from America. I mean, really. I mean, yeah, Arnold in the 70s, I mean, he came from Austria, but he came, he wasn't Mr. Olympia before he moved to America, and really he moved to America and kind of got engulfed in the Southern California bodybuilding culture, and I think he changed his style of training when he came to America. I mean, if you learn back, and actually we're going to go, that's another book I'm going to go over, is Education of a Bodybuilder, where Arnold talks, about a bunch of stuff. That's a really cool book. We'll definitely go over that one. But when Arnold first came to America, he got beat by Frank Zane in a bodybuilding show. And Arnold was much bigger. But, I mean, Frank was Mr. Aesthetic, and even then he was really lean and had a very aesthetically pleasing physique, and Arnold really was just bulky and big, and Frank Zane beat him. And, partly because of that, and then partly, changing countries and being engulfed in a different bodybuilding culture, he changed his training style quite a bit. So that was in the early 70s, even late 60s even. It's probably like 68, if I had to guess. But then even in like the 80s, I mean, the best bodybuilders were from America. So even though they were not doing as much research, we still had, even though they were bros, bodybuilding bros, they were still producing from a bodybuilding standpoint. So I don't really know how much the communist scientists were really focusing on muscle building. I mean, of course they probably were, but I think they were more focused on performance, more focused on specifically Olympic weightlifting, which is kind of a theme here. This guy's kind of extrapolating a lot from Olympic weightlifting to bodybuilding, and they're really not that closely related. Continued. Don't train like Mr. America. In fact, here in America, our lack of research has caused the average bodybuilder in the local gym to fall into the train like me, I'm Mr. America syndrome. This is the biggest mistake you could ever make. Perhaps you've done it already. It goes like this. You pick up a magazine or read a book about a particular bodybuilding champion's training method, and you faithfully follow every recommendation he gives you. You do the same exercises he does, you eat the same foods he eats, and you buy all the expensive supplements he endorses. The problem is, you don't really know what you're doing. You're following the program on blind faith, simply because it works for a champion bodybuilder. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to belittle any of the champion bodybuilders out there. They deserve your respect and admiration because of all the hard work and dedication it took for them to get to where they are. However, what I'm saying is that when someone becomes a bodybuilding champion, this does not automatically mean his particular training method is the most effective way to build muscles. There may be a better way that even the top bodybuilders don't know about. In other words, had your favorite champion bodybuilder used a more advanced and superior training system, he would have achieved an even larger degree of muscle growth in a shorter period of time. So this is good information. This is really good information. So, he's kind of addressing what I was talking about. Like, hey, we still have the best bodybuilders at the time. And kind of what he's saying is, well, shit, they probably got results in spite of what they were doing, not because of what they were doing. And I like what he's saying here. Now, I don't necessarily agree 100%, but this is a good thing for all of us to remember, is there's a lot of people that get results in spite of what they're doing, not because of what they're doing. And just because you're jacked and big, A, it doesn't mean you know what you're doing, and two, let's say you even know what you're doing, but if someone is a genetic elite and they've built a ton of muscle already, and they're already jacked, they're already a champion bodybuilder or a champion powerlifter, what they're doing at that point is not what they did to get there necessarily. That's why there's levels to it. What they did as a beginner is probably what they're, different from a volume standpoint, different from an exercise selection standpoint, different from an intensity standpoint, different from a frequency standpoint, et cetera, than what they did in the beginning to get them to where they ultimately ended up. You don't want to just follow a champion bodybuilder or a champion powerlifter's program when you're just a beginner and think that that's going to be the fast track to getting to where they're at. I mean, that's a mistake that everyone makes. I made it. I'm sure a lot of you listening right now have made it. So that's a good point, All right. So, he's saying, hey, another thing is I think that's important to bring up here is I think a lot of people didn't, at this time in the late 80s, early 90s, they didn't really have a good idea of what to do. There wasn't a lot of research. There wasn't a lot of people. I mean, really, they were just getting information from the bodybuilding magazines, a few books. But again, there wasn't a lot of information. It wasn't nearly what it is today. So it was easy. Like I said right in the beginning, like it was easy to just, hey, you don't really know what you're doing, but you'll just follow anything because you don't know if it's true. You're like, hey, you have no filter to put it through. So you just end up following blindly just whatever you hear. I think this happened a lot in early days in CrossFit because I didn't really know how to train for the CrossFit games. So you saw a lot of people just doing a bunch of random shit. And they were just like, oh, that's what CrossFit is. But then if you look at how the top CrossFitters train now, there's kind of a method. I mean, there's a system to follow. I mean, if you talk to a lot of the top CrossFit guys now or girls, I mean, what they're doing is they pretty much have a yearly periodized program to how to peak for the CrossFit games and what you have to do post-competition and the type of things, training modalities you need to do at certain points of the year. Like it's pretty much know what you have to do throughout the training year. But in the beginning, no one really knew. And then Rich Froning came about and was just kicking everybody's ass. So then, of course, everyone's like, well, what's he doing? And then I remember back then, and I don't even know if this was true or not, but I think even if it was true, Froning just came out and was like, oh, yeah, so people are like, well, what did you do? And he's like, well, I just pretty much train 8 hours a day. And people are like, what? Are you shitting me? Like most people were at that point just training CrossFit like you train in the gym, like, at most maybe 2 sessions a day at an hour a time, 2 hours at a time. So maybe at most 4 hours a day. And that would be crazy. And then this guy says he's training 8 hours a day. 2 things with this. One, I mean, it might have been true, and he might actually been training 8 hours a day. I think he probably was. But even if, let's say he wasn't, let's say he was only training 4 or 5 hours a day. The fact that he was kicking everyone's ass and no one really knew how he was training and no one really knew what the best method was, let's say he wasn't, but he said he was, he could have messed everyone up. Everyone would have started training 8 hours a day. Because again, they didn't have any filter to put it through. They didn't know like, oh, well, he's saying he's training 8 hours a day. Well, guess what? All these other people that were great at this only did 4 hours a day. So what's he doing? Why is he doing that? People are like, well, shit, I guess that's what it takes. I mean, he's pretty much the first person that's really figured it out then. I guess it's 8 hours a day. And that might have been true. For him, that might have been true. So again, that's kind of what I'm talking about here is when you don't have a lot of information to use as a filter to push things through, it's very easy just to follow things blindly. That's why information is so important. You got to have that bullshit detector. All right, so moving on. So we're getting into some meat and potatoes here. So why is this program so effective? This isn't guesswork. We're not following someone else's system on blind faith. We're taking hard scientific data proven in real world on real weightlifters and combining it with the most recent advances in exercise physiology. This is a system you can put your trust in because it's based on the way your body works, not just the way you can work your body. I have one word of caution to give you before we begin. It's this. The Bulgarian Burst Training System is an advanced program designed for the serious bodybuilder. We recommend that beginning weightlifters train seriously for 6 to 8 weeks before starting this program. Otherwise, your body won't know how to handle the incredible changes and rapid muscular growth this system is capable of producing. But if you've been training for a while and you believe you're ready for the fastest progress you've ever seen, you're going to love this system. All you have to do is put in the work. So some more hype, but he's just saying, hey, this is super advanced, and, proceed at your own risk. Moving on. In the next section, he actually talks quite a bit about muscle fiber type and energy systems, which was, honestly, the information is very similar to in championship bodybuilding with Chris Aceto, the last book we went over. So we'll skip over this, and we'll get into the next section. We'll skip that section. So we're going to talk about here just a quick little detail on how your muscles respond to training. So I want to dig into this a little bit. So overall muscle enlargement. There are 3 basic categories of muscular development. Hypertrophy, enlargement of the muscle fibers. Hyperplasia, increase in the number of muscle fibers by splitting of the fibers themselves. And capillarization, increase in the number of capillaries feeding the muscle tissue. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about hyperplasia. Funny story. So when I think it was my freshman year of college, I was taking it was like an elective. It was like a weight training, like intro to weight training or something, just as a stupid elective. And it was mostly just working out. I mean, literally we'd just go to the gym and we would lift. So it was like, oh, cool, free couple credits. That's fun. But there was a little bit of a in-classroom component to it. And, we had this old-ass textbook, and in it, there was one, we're going over how the muscles respond to resistance training, and there was a section on hyperplasia. And I remember raising my hand. I was like, to my professor, I was like, hey, I don't know about this. Like, from what I've read, I don't feel like this book is correct. And it was saying the same thing that this book is saying. Like, oh, yeah, so your muscles, the muscle fibers themselves can get bigger. That's hypertrophy. But hyperplasia is when you're training, you get an increase in the actual number of muscle fibers themselves, splitting and creating new muscle fibers. I was like, I don't think that actually happens. But I don't know where I got that information from. I mean, I probably just read it from, I don't know, a magazine or something at that point, or maybe a book. I don't know. Or maybe at that point I was already certified in personal training. Maybe it was like the personal training certification I did or something. But I remember reading it at that point that hyperplasia wasn't really a thing. But I never really looked scientifically into it. But really, there's actually a lot of debate on hyperplasia. There's actually a little bit of research that does support hyperplasia, but most of the research on hyperplasia is around animal research. It's controversial. Like I said, it's controversial if it actually ever happens in humans. And even if it did, even if, let's just say there was a little bit of hyperplasia that did happen, the impact on actual cross-sectional area increases would be very minimal. So it's not something that would contribute largely to muscular development, let's say if it even did happen. And like I said, the research is very spotty, and it's hard to even analyze fiber counts most times. So even the research that maybe does support hyperplasia, even in animals, I think a lot of times it would be hard to even know how accurate it is. So it's just kind of a side note here. And then I think what he's talking about when he's referring to the capillarization, so the increase in number of capillaries feeding the muscle tissues, maybe he's talking about sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. But again, that's, I don't know if really the increase in number of capillaries has a whole lot to do with the increase in cross-sectional area. So just a little side note there. I wanted to talk about hyperplasia just because I remember reading that in a book freshman year of college and having a whole discussion in the middle of a class, middle of a lecture on hyperplasia. And I remember the professor, he didn't know. I called him out on it, and he didn't know. Yeah, that happens sometimes. I actually respect him for saying he didn't know. Because I was like, hey, is this true? Like, is this a real thing? Because I don't think it is. And he wasn't sure. Back to the book. In order to help you understand the overall process of what happens to your muscles during exercise, I'm going to use an analogy that describes the process of general body adaptation. In other words, I want to describe how your body conforms to the stress you put it through during weight training. It goes like this. If you were to vigorously rub your hands together several times a day, eventually you would form calluses on the palms of your hands. This is known as a training effect. By applying this repetitive irritation, rubbing your hands together, the body responds to the irritation by thickening and hardening the skin in the areas of the greatest irritation. The new thickened skin allows the friction to occur without damaging the outer skin or its underlying tissues. However, if you applied that friction at too great an intensity or frequency, you would get blisters on your hands and damage to your skin. So I like that analogy, how he uses that. Another great analogy that people use is, and it's simple for everyone to understand, is the sun. I mean, if you are pale as can be, you go out into the sun, the sun will burn you. I mean, you'll get sunburn. But if you apply just a little bit of overload, so just a little bit of sun, you can start to develop a tan. Or if you develop a lot, if you just get burnt, a lot of times your body has to adapt. You'll get burnt, so it's like, okay, you applied too much resistance here, too much sun, and then your body has to adapt to it, and then eventually it kind of develops a tan. And then as the more tan you get, the more adaptation your body has, the less likely you're going to get burnt, the more sun you can handle. So, I mean, kind of just thinking of that process of how your skin gets tanned or burnt. I mean, everyone's gone through that, and then the process of, okay, so at first, if you're really pale, you're going to be out in the sun. You're going to be out in the sun all day. You're going to be at the beach or at the pool. You got to apply sunscreen. You got to protect yourself. It's almost like, you're governing how much resistance you're going to be applied. But then as you get tanner, you need less and less sunscreen, to the point where when you're actually tan, middle of the summer, you don't need to apply any sunscreen because you can be out in the sun and you're not going to burn. For most people, that's how I am anyway. Continuing on from the book. The same thing is true with your muscles, as we'll see in a moment, but the key thing to remember here is that in order to achieve the proper adaptation or training effect, you have to have the proper combination of the two important factors I just mentioned, intensity and frequency. In the case of calluses on your hands, the intensity of the friction created by the rubbing your hands together and the combination of how often it is repeated, frequency, will make the difference between getting calluses and blisters. Also, the irritation must be intense enough for adaptation to occur, yet not so intense to cause damage before the physiological process of calluses formation can take place. Think of bodybuilding as body irritation. Here's how all this relates to your muscle growth. Bulgarians think of weight training as a form of irritation to the body. By thinking in terms of irritation, you'll be able to put all the factors that influence your bodybuilding progress into perspective. In order to develop the quickest progress, our Power Burst Training System carefully applies the maximum irritation that the body can tolerate, yet is still capable of adapting to without damage. This is done by controlling the intensity, the volume, and the frequency of the irritation. And as we'll see later on, we also advocate helping the body adapt to the stress more efficiently with restorative measures such as diet, nutritional supplements, and physical therapy. So really what he's saying here is, okay, so we look at training is kind of how the analogy of rubbing your hands together, and that's how we look at the training, and we want to do as much as we possibly can tolerate. So like someone like Dr. Mike Israetel would refer to that as maximal recoverable volume. We talk about that a little bit later. That's how this program is set up. Okay, moving on. Here's where things start to get good. Principles of weight training, the difference between training volume and intensity. Training volume is total weight lifted in your workout. An example would be if you were to bench press 200 pounds and you performed 5 sets of this exercise, with each set consisting of 8 repetitions, in that case, the volume would be 200 pounds times 8 reps times 5 sets equals 8,000 pounds. So we're, training volume, training tonnage, weight times sets times reps. Training intensity is the average weight lifted. So volume divided by total repetitions, or sets times reps. To illustrate the difference between intensity and volume, let's use the above example. The total volume was 8,000 pounds. Divide 8,000 by total repetitions, 5 sets of 8 reps, 40 reps. 8,000 divided by 40 reps equals 200 pounds. So the average weight lifted was 200 pounds. Now let's say another person performs 3 sets of bench presses. His sets and reps looked like this. Set 1, 185 times 10. Set 2, 250 times 6. Set 3, 315 times 3. Total of 3 sets, 4,295 total volume. Now divide the volume by total repetitions, and you get the average weight would be 226 pounds. The average weight lifted was greater on the second workout. So if you've performed the first workout and another person performed the second workout, you would have trained at a higher volume while the other person trained at a higher intensity. All right, so we're pretty much just explaining volume as tonnage and then intensity as, the way he's talking about is just dividing the reps by total pounds, but really what we're talking about with intensity is just the percent of your 1 rep max. Now, he's gonna talk about something else here that I wanna dig into. For simplicity at this point, we're excluding time as a factor in intensity. But let me just explain briefly how time affects intensity. Let's say you have 2 identical workouts, workout A and workout B, and each workout is performed exactly like the other, except workout A is performed in 30 minutes, while workout B is performed in 40 minutes. This being the case, workout A has a higher intensity rating since the same volume was achieved in a shorter amount of time. So this is referring to training density. And so just kind of when you talk about two workouts, if you're able to do the exact same workout, so same performance, same amount of total work, same amount of intensity, but one takes you 30 minutes, one takes you 40 minutes, the 30 minutes one has more intensity just because it took shorter amount of time. So the training density, the total amount of workload done per the amount of time was higher. Now, training density is something that it's another variable that we can manipulate. But one issue with it is, and we'll get into this later on here, and actually in this book he talks about it, is you want to be careful when you use training density as a metric to progress over time, because what happens is you end up taking shorter rest periods. And in research, in the literature, I mean, pretty much every time short rest periods are compared against longer rest periods, the longer rest periods win because you're able to be more recovered and you're able to lift heavier. Lifting heavier is obviously more intensity, and then also lifting heavier is able to get more quality volume in too. So although training density is a variable that we can manipulate, we want to be careful focusing too much on it because it can then negatively affect training volume and intensity, which are more important than training density. But with all things being equal, and just kind of cutting away at the low-hanging fruit, training density can be a valuable tool. And that's one reason why I do recommend just jotting down what time you start your workout and what time you end your workout, so you do have an idea of how long the workouts are taking. And even week to week, you can use this as a variable. So, for example, like when you're on a training block, a 4-week training block, you should be able to get the workouts. You should get a good idea how long the workouts are going to take you. So if nothing else, you can pretty much say, okay, well, day one workout takes me about 90 minutes or whatever. So roughly, plus or minus, whatever, 10 minutes or something, about how long the workout's going to take. So if the workout took a long time, took over 2 hours, you'd say, oh, well, shit, what happened here? Something happened. Was I more distracted? Was I on my phone more? Did I get in conversations at the gym, et cetera, et cetera? Or on the flip side, let's say you got a workout done extremely fast. You're like, shit, it only took me 65 minutes, but it wasn't a good workout. You can say, oh, well, maybe my rest periods were too quick, something like that. Moving on. Intensity does not mean quality. Although it is not necessary or practical for you to calculate every single workout to determine the volume and intensity, it is important for you to understand these terms. Unfortunately, the term intensity has been misused in bodybuilding articles in the past to mean the quality of training or the process of training hard. This is definitely true. A lot of times people will talk about higher intensity stuff, and intensity gets referred to as almost like effort. Intensity is effort. But that's not the definition of intensity. The definition of intensity is the percent of 1 RM. So, continued. This definition is incorrect because if you were to try to duplicate both the previous two workouts, you may very well find the higher volume workout to be much more strenuous than difficult to perform. So, I guess what he's trying to say here is, hey, a higher volume workout might be quote unquote harder, even though the intensity is lower. Understanding these concepts is vital so you can pinpoint your objective in training. If your objective is to train for strength, then the intensity must be high. But if you're training for muscle size, hypertrophy, the volume must be high. That is the key thing to remember. This is good information. We've talked about it a ton, but yeah, intensity is important for strength, volume is important for hypertrophy. Although there is a lot of carryover, but general terms here. Now, it must be understood that these terms are relative. That is, to train for maximum intensity would mean to do multiple sets of single repetition maximal lifts, whereas to train for maximum volume would mean to exercise using only your body weight calisthenics to complete exhaustion. Neither of these two extremes would be beneficial for developing muscle size. So really what he's talking about here is quality volume, not total volume. And that's something to think about when you're calculating total volume for your training, is that not all volume is created equal. If it was just about trying to get as much volume in as possible, then yeah, you would just do bodyweight stuff. Let's just do as many reps or even just lightweight stuff. When you start calculating volume, you recognize it's a lot easier to calculate or accumulate more volume with higher reps. That's why higher reps tend to work better for bodybuilding methods. But there's a reason why that sweet spot is at 6 to 12 reps. Because when you get to 20, 30, 40 reps, Yeah, the volume will get higher, but it's not as quality volume because the intensity has to be lower. Now, there is research to support those higher reps taken to failure can still support muscle growth, but again, it has to be taken to failure, and those are brutal. They take a long time, and then it's so far away from a strength component that, and it's not more beneficial. Like, yeah, let's just say you can also build muscle doing high reps, but you're not going to build much strength at all. I mean, just pretty much just muscular endurance. So why not do 6 to 12, build the same amount of muscle, accumulate a lot of volume, enough volume to facilitate hypertrophy, but then still stay within the range of easy to progress with strength too. With higher reps, super high reps, it's hard to look at your training progressions and actually see the progress week to week and month to month. Moving on. Training variation is very important. Training variation not only refers to varying the exercises and the order in which they are performed, but also to varying the volume and intensity of your training sessions. Several studies have proven that varying the intensity and volume in a specific manner will increase training productivity and reduce the risk of overtraining. So really what he's saying here is, hey, training variation is very important. Now, training variation is referring to the exercises and how they're performed, the exercise selection, but also varying the volume and intensity. So really what we're saying here is, hey, training variation is important. Me personally, how I like to program, I say, okay, well, all right, yeah, training variation is important. Well, let's vary the volume and intensity. Well, yeah, we'll mix and match some exercises, but for the most part, we're not going to vary exercise selection as much. Now, how most people train, like how most bodybuilders train, the kind of list of exercise style, is they use exercise selection, like changing the exercises, as like the main training variation. It's kind of like what conjugate does. I mean, for the most part, even if you look at like West Side training or conjugate training is, well, hey, the intensity and the volume doesn't change much, like maybe within, plus or minus a little bit, but it's, for the most part, you're doing max effort at a certain amount of percentage, which is maximal, and then dynamic effort, which is submaximal, but again, staying within a short difference in range there week to week. But you'll use exercise variation as like the main variation. Okay, so that's what they do. Now, for me, I like specificity. So I like to say, all right, what's our goal? Let's pick out what exercises lead to our goal most effectively, and let's use the variation from a volume and intensity standpoint to facilitate progress while we keep the main exercises mostly the same. I just think this is a better way. One, it's more specific to our goal when we pick exercises that are most beneficial for our goal, whether that's powerlifting, bodybuilding, or whatever. But then also it's easier to see progressions week to week and month to month when we keep most of the exercises the same. When you're constantly varying the exercises, it's hard to really analyze progress. Moving on. Training speed. Faster is better. The speed at which each repetition is performed is critical for maximum hypertrophy. It has been suggested by some that each repetition should be performed slowly. This is incorrect. The truth is, the faster you lift a weight, the greater the intensity and training effect you will achieve. So really, he's just talking about compensatory acceleration. Just, hey, when you have a weight on the bar, move it as fast as you can. And I like that. I mean, yeah, I think there was a point in time where, hey, there's something to be said for tempo work, like slowing down the eccentrics and even slowing down the concentrics at a, for a certain degree. But there was a time when people were thinking like, oh, time under tension is what's most important for hypertrophy. If you want to build muscle, just slow down all the reps. Yes and no. For the most part, yeah, time under tension is important, but total volume is important. So when you slow down the reps, you have to lower the weight considerably. So why not just use as much weight as we can, go fast, get the same time under tension, because we'll do higher reps. So you can, this is all a blending together. And when you look at the research, slow training isn't any better for hypertrophy than normal eccentric training. That's, again, not to say that tempo work's not important, and there's a lot of applications for tempo work in both strength and muscle building, but there's also something to be said for, hey, move the weight fast. The faster you can move the concentrics, the better your performance is going to be. And performance is very important from the actual training variables here, intensity and volume, and accumulating them, but then also just the performance from a set-to-set basis. Like, you want to just move it as fast as you possibly can. Now, something to be said here, and when it's talking about training speed, one thing I see people mess up with, especially with light weights during warm-ups, is, okay, so you get this idea that, okay, we want to move the weight whenever you put weight on the bar, we want to move it as fast as possible. And we know for us, an certain extent that we want to maintain control, but it's very hard to maintain control with super light weights. So if you move the bar, like say you're benching, let's say you're like a 400-pound bencher and you're warming up with the bar and you move it as fast as you can, I mean, your reps are going to look super sloppy. Even with 135, it looks super sloppy. Or you see people deadlifting, like people who are like a 600, 700-pound deadlifter, and they're obviously really strong, but then they start out with like 135, and they're just yanking it up and just looking kind of ridiculous. So I get what they're trying to do, like trying to move the weight really, really fast just to kind of get in that habit, which is good. But me personally, if we want to get into a habit of moving fast, like why don't we just throw some jumps in at the end of our warm-up? Like, let's not use 135 to just throw the weights around and get out of position and just start warming up with a bad movement pattern. Like me, I want the warm-ups to look perfect. Like every single rep of my warm-up, I want to be perfect. Like if you were watching my warm-up, if we were doing a video on my warm-ups, you could break up any one of my reps, whether it's the bar or 135, 225 or whatever, and it's perfect. There's no excuse for the warm-ups not to be perfect. That's just my opinion. So that's when you see me benching the bar, like I'm not just throwing it around. Or when I'm warming up for a deadlift at 135, I'm not just yanking it and getting out of position. And if you slowed down the video, you'd say, oh, you're all out of whack here. Like, no, I'm trying to get the reps. I try to move it as fast as I can, but also with perfect technique. Again, because every rep we're doing is practice. So we don't want to do, people will say, practice makes perfect. No, perfect practice makes perfect. So just reinforcing perfect technique every chance we get is something that I prioritize. So I just think that, hey, yeah, we want to move things fast, but within reason. So when we're using the bar on the bench, like, yeah, we all know you can throw the bar. Yeah, we could. We could just throw the bar. But should we? Probably not. Same with deadlifts. Now, same thing with squats, too. People just squat super fast with the bar and get way out of position. And then, bottom line, I want perfect technique during warm-ups. Each and every rep, I want perfect technique. Next section. This next section's titled Bulgarians Don't Take Vacations. Periodization is the process of structuring the variation in your training volume and intensity over a given period of time. Usually, the training program is divided into segments of 3 periods. Each training period has a different focus or phase, which supposedly builds on the previous segment. An example of this would be bodybuilders who during the off-season train with heavier weights and fewer repetitions to gain bulk. As their competition approaches, they decrease the weight and increase the amount of sets and reps they perform to increase training volume. The Bulgarians don't periodize their training. They have found that periodization actually slows down an athlete's overall progress by wasting valuable adaptation energy on intensity levels not in line with their training objectives. Remember, the body will adapt in a specific way to a specific irritation or stress. So why water down the adaptive response by switching the levels of intensity or stress every few months? Instead, the Bulgarians have developed a far more productive and effective way to periodize or vary their training program. It's called micro-periodization, and we will be covering it in detail later on in this manual. So he says the Bulgarians don't periodize their training, but they use what's called micro-periodization. So actually, they do periodize their training. And here, spoiler alert, pretty much what he describes as micro-periodization is daily undulated periodization, DUP training. So what he's saying, the Bulgarians don't do traditional periodization. So traditional periodization would be traditional like linear periodization or traditional block periodization, where it's like you're doing high reps, low reps, peaking or something like that. Which, by the way, is still very, very effective. Like, don't let this confuse you. Like, just even very basic linear periodization, a lot of the best powerlifters in the world use that. And they still do. I mean, I love daily undulating periodization and doing different things, being creative with how we structure periodization and how we structure periodization models. But shit, even just basic linear periodization or basic block periodization works very, very well. But I just think it's funny that he says Bulgarians don't periodize their training, but then he goes on to describe daily undulating periodization, which we'll get to. Next thing he talks about is rest period, which I hinted at previously. How much rest should you have between sets? To answer this, we must first understand which energy system is being utilized during lifting. When you perform low repetitions, 1 to 5 reps, your source of energy is primarily the ATP creatine phosphate system. Oh, you remember that? Your phosphagen stores are completely replenished in 3 to 4 minutes after each set. So if you're training for maximum strength gains, the rest period should be fairly long, approximately 5 minutes, to ensure complete recuperation from one set to the next. However, if you're training for maximum muscle size, your repetitions need to be higher, 6 reps and over, because this will utilize the lactic acid energy source, and your rest periods between sets must be shorter, approximately 2 minutes, to sufficiently tax the lactic acid system. Here's another interesting point to remember. As you become more conditioned to your training, your recovery capacity will increase, thus allowing you to decrease your rest periods. However, never less than 60 seconds. So really what he's saying is, hey, if your goal is strength, you need more rest time. This is a question I get asked all the time by clients, and it's always like, hey, how much rest do I need? Because it's something that I don't really prescribe. I don't like to prescribe rest periods. I mean, I will occasionally, depending on what our goals are, and sometimes with assistance movements. But for our main lifts, whether our goals are bodybuilding or strength-related, specifically strength-related, I don't like to prescribe specific rest periods for our main work, just because I want you to kind of auto-regulate it. I want you to do your next set when you're ready. Like I said, when you look at the literature, when you look at the research, taking more rest within reason for most people is going to be the right answer. Like just taking a little bit more to make sure you're recovered for the next set. Now, again, we all have a limited amount of time, so I don't want people to take that to the extreme and say, oh, we need 10 minutes of rest in between sets or anything like that. But 3 to 5 minutes is, I mean, when you're training for strength and squatting, deadlifting, benching heavy, like 3 to 5 minutes is the range you want to be in. Now, when you get into some of the smaller assistance movements, you can speed things up a little bit with that without being, without getting yourself into any trouble. But yeah, we don't want to rush our workouts and then end up having to lower our performance standard just because we're rushing. Continued in the book. Some people have claimed that extremely short rest periods, 15 to 40 seconds, should be utilized. However, this type of training does not allow adequate recovery and therefore forces you to use lighter weights due to fatigue. When you do that, you severely compromise the level of your training intensity, which will significantly limit your progress. The bottom line, use higher reps and rest for 2 minutes between sets. So this brings us to the big question. How often should you train? In the past, it has been suggested that you should train each body part twice per week for maximum size and strength gains. The Bulgarians have found that training frequency for each body part should be as high as possible without overtraining, but definitely more than twice per week. As a matter of fact, they found that merely 72 hours after a training session, deconditioning will occur, where you suffer a loss of strength and atrophy. So you start to lose strength and size. How often you should train? Read on. The answer may surprise you. Here we go. It's getting good now. Getting good. Believe it or not, the Bulgarians train 5 times a day. Each workout lasts approximately 40 minutes. They train every day with no layoffs. They believe taking layoffs is actually harder on the body since the sudden drop in stress levels confuses the body's physiology and reduces its adaptability. When they train, they use 90 to 100% of their maximum lifts at every workout, performing 50 to 60 of these maximum lifts every day. Remember, they're Olympic lifters, so they're only interested in 2 Olympic lifts. Long training sessions are not productive. Each of us has a limited amount of adaptive energy that we use to recover from our workouts. If you reach the point in your workout where your adaptive energy is exhausted, yet you continue to train, you will overtrain and actually lose ground. The Bulgarians have discovered that your workouts should be broken up into smaller chunks lasting approximately 30 to 40 minutes each. They have found that the body's testosterone levels drop after 45 minutes of intense training, so a training session longer than 45 minutes is actually counterproductive. All right, so here is the real meat and potatoes of this program. This is what it's all about. So he went to, the cat's out of the bag. He went to Bulgaria, watched them train, and this is the key point he figured out. He said, well, you know what? The Bulgarians they're doing like 5 sessions a day, and their workouts are only about 40 minutes each. 40 minutes, 5 sessions, that's the key. They're not doing long workouts. They're doing a lot of workouts, obviously, but they're doing small mini ones throughout the day. Now, it's a little bit of faulty logic when he gets into talking about testosterone drop, and we've talked about this before, and this was actually a thing that was talked about quite a bit back in the day, is just that long training sessions were not productive. But at the end of the day, it's a lot about what the work was. So I would love to see research done on splitting up workouts. But at the end of the day, training volume, training intensity was done, but one workout's 2 hours, and the other one is a bunch of half-hour workouts. At the end of the day, I think it would be exactly the same. However, there is something to be said for when you split up the workouts, multiple times a day, especially when the Bulgarians were pretty much only squatting, front squatting, and snatching and clean and jerk variations. That's pretty much all they were doing. So really the way they were splitting it up was just a way to get more quality work in. I think that's really the point here. Yeah, I don't think testosterone has anything to do with it. I don't think that long workouts have anything to do with it really per se. It's just, hey, when we split up our training throughout the day, we're able to get a little bit of rest in between sessions. We're able to get a meal, some hydration, et cetera, in between, the volume, just kind of distribute it throughout the week. We're able to get more quality in. It's kind of the same idea why high frequency training is good in general. So even when you look at spreading out training volume and intensity over the course of a training week, for the most part, the real reason why training volume can be about the same and you can get more results from higher frequency versus less frequency is just because you're getting higher quality training in. You can do a big chest day and a complete blowout, or you can evenly take that volume and spread it out over 3 days, and you'll have higher quality training sessions. You'll have better performance in those three training sessions if they're spread out over the course of an entire week or just all on one day. So it's kind of just taking this to the extreme. Okay, we can have a 2-hour session one day, or we can take that 2-hour session and just split it up. So that's really what they're saying. So they train 7 days a week, 5 times a day. That's 35 training sessions per week. That's pretty wild. But the other part that they're talking about is obviously they were training for Olympic lifting, so they trained heavy. And that's kind of the Bulgarian method. The Bulgarian method, when people talk about it, it's high frequency and they max out every day. Max out every training session. Here's what he talks about. The key point to remember is this. The Bulgarians have discovered that if you train at any lower than 90% of your maximum, you're teaching your body to adapt to lighter weights, and thus you will never achieve the maximum results you want. Yeah. For Olympic lifting, yeah, there is something to be said for, hey, just because they're so technical, they're so neurological, and there's a lot to the actual movement that, yeah, there is a benefit to training at a higher percentage than obviously for bodybuilding or even for powerlifting. Moving on. 2 more things the Bulgarians don't do. So they don't lift light, and they don't do any aerobic work. Furthermore, the Bulgarian athletes don't perform any aerobic conditioning. In fact, they believe aerobic conditioning is actually counterproductive. Remember, the body becomes its function. So if you add aerobic conditioning to your program, you're forcing your body to adapt to 2 different stimuli, strength and cardiovascular conditioning, at the same time, which would severely tax the body's limited adaptive energy, therefore forcing a compromise. Well, there is something to be said for this. There is some research on interference. But keep in mind that there's a lot of benefits to improving your aerobic work as well. As a bodybuilder and as a powerlifter, as you increase your aerobic capacity and you're able to recover better from your workouts, you're able to get more training density done. He even said in this book that, when your conditioning improves, you're able to get more work done in a shorter period of time. You're able to take a little bit less rest. So I don't know. I'm not overly concerned with needing to take out all aerobic work. And what's funny is even Chris Aceto in Championship Bodybuilding, he talked about that. Especially when your goal is to build muscle, don't do any type of cardio work. Only use cardio for fat loss. But I think and there was a point where I probably believed that. And cardio is definitely something you don't have to do it. Especially, you can get a lot of the same cardiovascular benefits just from lifting weights. But I don't want you to be afraid of it. You can definitely do some lower intensity cardio, and that can be an integral part to your resistance training, whether your goal is powerlifting or bodybuilding. But the Bulgarians didn't do it. They also didn't do any warm-ups. You may be surprised to hear that the Bulgarians do not believe in doing warm-up sets. They feel that warming up with lighter weights will actually be counterproductive to their objective of lifting maximum weight for a single repetition. Again, the body becomes its function. Therefore, their warm-ups consist of stretching and lifting a weight equivalent to 80% of their maximum for a few repetitions. So pretty much they just walk in, I guess, do a couple stretches and put 80% on the bar. I don't recommend that at all. The Bulgarian style is truly amazing. Some would say outrageous, but it works. And in the next chapter, you're going to learn how to apply it to your bodybuilding program for the fastest muscle growth you've ever seen. So I'm interested. I bet you're all interested. Like, how are we going to adapt this Bulgarian method to bodybuilding? Man, it's important to remember that pretty much what he's explaining is how the Bulgarians train for Olympic weightlifting, not bodybuilding. So that's where this gets a little interesting. Back to the book. Even though the Bulgarian athletes' training system I've described is used for Olympic lifting, their special understanding of how the body works makes their system apply to superior bodybuilding as well. The basic framework is the same, only the sets, reps, and rest times are changed. Following is the training system for bodybuilding. All right, so pretty much he's saying, hey, you know what? Yeah, it's for Olympic weightlifting, but just by changing a couple things, it'll work for bodybuilding too. He also talks about, like, should you choose strength or size? Interesting point here. So he's saying, don't confuse the body. Due to your muscles' limited amount of adaptive energy, you must be very clear and specific about the results you wish to obtain. Do you want to increase the amount of muscle mass in your arms, or do you want to increase your arm strength? If you're more interested in strength, then train specifically for that objective. But don't confuse the body by forcing more than one type of adaptive response. Likewise, if size is your goal, focus your body's adaptive energy specifically for that objective. So really to what he's saying, hey, if you want to get big, focus on getting big. If you want to gain strength, then focus on gaining strength. And really to maximize size or to maximize strength, that's how you should train. Like if you want to be the best bodybuilder possible, well, guess what? We got to do everything is geared towards being as big as possible, you know? Or if you want to be the best powerlifter possible, hey, we're going to design our training to be as strong as possible. Now, with that being said, there's going to be certain points in the year where it is most optimal for a powerlifter to focus on getting bigger, building muscle. And likewise, for a bodybuilder, there will be periods of time where it's best for them to focus on getting a little bit stronger. But this is essentially why, like, a power building program isn't what you want to do year long. Like when I wrote the Absolute Progress program, power building program, it was super, super popular. Everyone loves it. And I love that style of training. Like you can do that style of training a lot where it's like, hey, it's a lot of hypertrophy work, but then some strength work mixed in, kind of the best of both worlds. Like you can do that for, the vast majority of your training, but there should always be periods of time where you do focus 100% on whatever it is you're doing. So if you're a power lifter, you could do like power building, like a power building program for most of the year. And then when it comes time to get ready for a competition, take 2-3 months and actually focus 100% on powerlifting. So do something like Absolute Strength version 2.0, which is a meet prep program, 12 weeks. Like that's what I would recommend. Likewise, for bodybuilding, you could do like power building for the most part. And then when you get towards the last little bit of your competition prep, it's like, hey, there's not really any point in focusing on gaining strength anymore. It's just like, okay, we're focused 100% on just bodybuilding and just getting quality work in. And, there would be a point to prioritizing even less compound lifts at that point. So moving on, training for muscle growth, hypertrophy, which is what this is all about. Here's the points. Point A. Repetitions. For maximum muscle growth, your repetitions should be between 6 and 12. Sets for optimal growth. 15 to 18 sets should be performed on each body part in a given day. Holy shit. 15 to 18 sets per day. Research shows about 10 to 20 sets per week is good. So we're talking about doing that every single day. That's a lot. Frequency. Each body part should be worked at minimum 3 times per week. Okay, that's more reasonable. Duration. The duration of the workout should be 35 to 40 minutes. We already talked about that. Your workout can be broken into 3 sessions a day for 35 minutes in the morning, 35 minutes at noon, and 35 minutes in the evening. So here's kind of the setup. Reps between 6 to 12, 15 to 18 sets per day, work each muscle group minimum 3 times per week and do 30 to 45 minutes each workout, and then do 3 times a day. So he recommends 3 workouts a day. So he dropped down. The Bulgarians do 5, but for bodybuilding, he recommends doing 3. Continued. A modified type of periodization should be used. We call it micro-periodization. This is where volume and intensity are varied on a daily basis. Each body part will be trained 3 times per week. In the first training session, a weight is selected that allows 10 to 12 repetitions. In the second training session, you train with a weight that'll allow 8 to 10 repetitions. And then in the last training session of the week, you select a weight that allows 6 to 8 repetitions. So the way he splits it up, which really isn't all that crazy, is you train the full body over 2 days. So half the body on day 1, half the body on day 2. So it's the first 2 workouts are 10 to 12 reps, the second 2 workouts are 8 to 10 reps, and the last 2 workouts are 6 to 8. So again, like I said, this is daily undulating periodization 101. Different rep range throughout the week. So you're hitting everywhere from 6 to 12 reps throughout the training week, but you have, different days you have a high rep day, moderate rep day, and a low rep day. This type of variation of intensity levels is like a standard periodization schedule, except that instead of being drawn out over a period of months, it's compressed into a week. Daily undulating periodization. This allows variation to occur from one workout to the next, which reduces the risk of overtraining, as well as thoroughly encompassing the entire range of intensity to best stimulate muscle growth. So yeah, pretty much the periodization that he recommends is daily undulating periodization, which is interesting. This is 1990, and then about 20 years after that, it got really popular. So here's how the workout is set up. So Monday, you do chest and abs in the morning, thighs at noon, and then at night, triceps and calves. Then day 2, you do delts and low back in the morning, upper back at noon, and biceps and traps at night. So those first 2 days are 12 to 15 reps. Wednesday, you do, again, chest and abs in the morning, thighs at noon, triceps and calves at night. And then so the structure stays the same. Delts on Thursday, it would be delts, low back in the morning, back at noon, biceps and traps at night, and that's the 10 to 12 reps days. And then Friday, again, you do chest and abs in the morning, thighs at noon, triceps and calves at night. Saturday, delts and low back in the morning, upper back at noon, biceps and traps at night, and again, that's the 8 to 12. So splits the whole body up into 2 days. You have the 12 to 15 rep days, the 10 to 12 rep days, and the 8 to 12 rep days. Train 6 days a week, take Sunday off, which this is not really all that crazy. The only thing crazy about this is you split up the training up into 3 sessions a day, and the volume is extremely high per session. So, that's really the only thing that, is he's pretty much just, you blow out the muscle group each time you train it, and you do, you train each muscle group 3 times a week. So it's really not all that crazy. The only thing that's really crazy about this is the 3 sessions a week, which he talks about. Because really, let's be honest, 3 training sessions a day isn't practical for anybody. That's the real problem. Even if it was, let's say, even if we took everybody's training and split it up into multiple sessions a day, and let's just say that was best, let's just say that was optimal, who can do that? No one can split their training up into 3 days a week. He recognizes that. All right, so he says, you say you can't work out 3 times a day. That's okay. I've come up with a modified version of the Bulgarian Burst system that allows you to train twice a day and still get comparable results. So he says, all right, yeah, if you're too busy, you can't train 3 times a day, at least train twice a day. And with that set up, you would do day 1 would be chest, calves, and abs, and then day 1 in the morning would be chest, calves, and abs. Day 1 at night would be thighs and triceps, and then day 2 in the morning, back and traps, and then day 2 at night would be delts and biceps. So again, kind of same idea, but instead of splitting it up into 3 workouts a day, it would be 2 workouts a day. And I think that's more manageable. Especially if you had like a home gym or something, that would be manageable to where you would do half your workout in the morning and then half at night, and then if you went to work in between or whatever. I could train twice a day like that. Again, I don't know if it'd be super practical because of warm-up times and shit like that, but I can do that. I mean, that would be something I would maybe even consider playing around with this. And I've had clients where we've done twice-a-day workouts, where they've had home gyms and we've set this up like this. And I've had some clients that just, for whatever reason, they wanted to split their workouts up into morning and night, and we've done it. Shit, when I was training in high school for wrestling, I was a nut at certain points, and I split my training up into morning and afternoon. It probably was doing too much at the time, but I mean, I've done it, and it's twice a day is practical. Not for everybody, and again, I don't think it's better enough to go through the hassle, but it's interesting, definitely interesting. All right, so now that we have that general setup, there's a couple more things he talks about. How to perform each set for maximum results. Each set should be formed to momentary exhaustion, also known as failure, which means you should complete as many repetitions as possible in each set until you give out. Depending on what phase, A, B, or C, you're training in, you'll need to select a weight that will only allow the amount of repetitions for that phase. So 10 to 12, 8 to 10, 6 to 8, whatever. Of course, this will take some practice, and you will not always choose the correct weight, too heavy or too light. The point is that whatever weight you choose, you always complete the set to momentary exhaustion. Even if the weight is too light, you have to perform more repetitions than the phase dictates. So he recommends taking every set to failure. So not only is he recommends 15 to 18 sets per muscle group per training session, so 3 times a week for each muscle group. So about 3 times the amount of volume that the research shows is what you need to make progress. So 3 times that amount. He wants you to take every single set to failure. Again, this is super advanced. Like, it's probably a little too much, but I mean, hey, he told us in the beginning it was advanced. All right. So the other thing is the program's set up with modified compound sets. So a modified compound set is performed by alternating sets between 2 different body parts with rest between each set. For example, if you're going to perform a modified compound set for the abdominals and chest, so abs and chest, it would look like this: bench press, 1 minute rest, then sit-ups. So then you would take, a couple minutes rest. So you essentially just doing like a superset of 2 different muscle groups. And then he talks about some other ways to make the training harder, like you would need to make it harder. But this is just some advanced training techniques like we talked about in championship bodybuilding: forced reps, cheating reps, drop sets, partial reps, supersets, etc., etc. So let's get into it. So what exercises should you do? This is the actual training program he recommends. So we went over all the details. Here's the workout routine in practice here. So, an example week of training. Monday, AM session, chest and abs. 5 sets of incline dumbbell. So all reps are 10 to 12 here. 5 sets incline dumbbell press, compound set with 5 sets of crunches, then 5 sets of pec deck, compound set with hanging leg raises, 5 sets. Everything's 5 sets here. 5 sets of decline dumbbell press, then 5 sets of Roman chair sit-ups. At noon, again, all 10 to 12 reps. 3 sets leg extensions, 3 sets leg curls, 3 sets hack squats, 4 sets lunges. Those aren't supersetted or compound setted with anything, just leg extension, leg curls, hack squat, lunges. That's the afternoon. At night, triceps and calves. Again, all 10 to 12 reps. Tricep extensions, supersetted with standing heel raises, so standing calf raise. 5 sets tricep press down, compound set, 5 sets seated heel raises. Then 5 sets tricep kickback, compound set with calf raises on a leg press. So that's Monday. So you do 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 6, 39, 43. Man, you do a lot of volume here. So like 73 sets on Monday. Holy shit. Tuesday, 10 to 12 reps for everything. Morning sessions, shoulders and lower back. 5 sets lateral raises, compound set with 5 sets of Roman chair extensions. He says only 5 sets for lower back, so you don't do as many sets for lower back. Then you do 5 sets of front raises and then 5 sets of seated dumbbell press. So only 15 sets for shoulders in the morning. So then in the afternoon, you come in and do back. You do 5 sets of pull downs, 5 sets of seated rows, and 5 sets of bent over dumbbell rows. Then at nighttime, biceps and traps. You do 5 sets of concentration curls, 8 sets of dumbbell shrugs, compound setted with 5 sets of Scott bench curls, so preacher curls. Then you do 7 sets of low cable shrugs, compound set with 5 sets of cable curls. So damn, you're doing a lot of shrugs. So, but yeah, it's only biceps and traps that night. A lot of shrugs. Probably make them really sore. Wednesday. Now we're into the strength phase. So Wednesday and Thursday are 8 to 10 reps. Morning, 5 sets of incline press, supersetted with crunches. 5 sets of dips, supersetted with hanging leg raises. 5 sets of flat bench, supersetted with Roman chair sit-ups. So for the most part, so on Monday we did incline dumbbell, Wednesday incline barbell. Then we did pec deck on Monday, Wednesday dips, and then we did decline dumbbell press on Monday and flat bench on Wednesday. So he is changing the exercises up throughout the week. Come in at noon and do thighs. So we do 5 sets of front squats, 5 sets of leg presses, and 5 sets of back squat. Now that would be a tough session. Holy cow. That would probably be the most brutal. On paper, it looks like the easiest, but it'd be the hardest. 5 sets of front squats, 5 sets of leg press, and 5 sets of back squats in the afternoon session after you already did chest and abs in the morning. Damn. Then at night, you'd come in and do triceps and calves, do 5 sets of close grip bench, 5 sets of standing heel raises, 5 sets of tricep extensions, 5 sets of seated heel raises, 5 sets of seated French curls, and 5 sets of calf presses. Thursday, again, all 8 to 10 reps. Shoulders and low back in the morning, 5 sets of behind the neck presses, 5 sets of good mornings, 5 sets of medium grip upright rows, 5 sets of lateral raises. Come in and do back in the afternoon, 5 sets of bent over barbell rows, 5 sets of T-bar rows, and 5 sets of pull-ups. At night, biceps and traps, 5 sets of barbell curls, 5 sets of barbell shrugs, 5 sets of dumbbell curls, 5 sets of dumbbell shrugs, and then 5 sets of close grip reverse chins, 5 sets of upright rows. A lot of work. All right, so the last 2 days, Friday, this is the 6 to 8 repetition day. Bench press, 5 sets of bench press in the morning, 5 sets of crunches, 5 sets of incline press, 5 sets of Roman chair sit-ups, 5 sets of weighted dips, 5 sets of hanging leg raises. The afternoon, 6 sets of back squats, 5 sets of leg presses, 4 sets of front squats. At night, come in for triceps and calves, 5 sets reverse grip bench press, 5 sets of standing heel raises, 5 sets of close grip bench press, 5 sets of seated heel raises, 5 sets of tricep press down, 5 sets of calf presses. Saturday, the last training day of the week. Shoulders and low back in the morning, 5 sets of medium grip upright rows, 5 sets of good mornings, 5 sets of behind the neck press, 5 sets of heavy lateral raises. At noon, 5 sets of chin-ups, 5 sets of barbell rows, 5 sets of T-bar rows. At night, biceps and traps, 5 sets of barbell curls, 5 sets of dumbbell shrugs, 5 sets of dumbbell curls alternating, 5 sets of dumbbell shrugs, 5 sets of, no, that's 5 sets of barbell shrugs. So dumbbell shrugs and barbell shrugs. 5 sets of hammer curls, and then 5 sets of upright rows. So that's the workout. That is the workout. Now, that was for muscle building. He does have a note in here. After size is achieved, so after you've built the amount of muscle that you want for a while, and you want to switch to strength training, how would you set this up for strength training? To achieve this objective, simply incorporate the following modifications into the structure. So really what he does is just you lower the reps and everything. So day 1 and 2 becomes 4 to 5 reps instead of 10 to 12. Then day 3 and 4 becomes 3 and 4 reps instead of 8 to 10. And then days 5 and 6 becomes 1 and 2 reps instead of 6 to 8. So really you're just lowering the reps and increasing the weight here. Not all that too crazy. And then everything else pretty much stays the same. Although he does say that you're really only focused on compound exercises when you switch to strength. All right, so we're working our way through here. We got through the training. He has a couple more things that I want to point out. So this is the last chapter, restoration and relaxation. Your keys to the big payoff. Actually, second to last chapter. The Bulgarian Burst Training puts a The Bulgarian Burst Training puts a heavy demand on your body, so it's important that you're familiar with the various techniques that will enhance recovery from your workouts. You must remember that training with this system is like condensing a year's worth of conventional training into 3 or 4 months. So we highly recommend that you use these techniques in order to help your body recover and grow from these demanding workouts. All right, so he recommends after your workouts to run or ride a stationary bike at an easy pace, like a 10-minute mile pace, for 7 to 10 minutes. Remember, the purpose of this is not for aerobic conditioning, so don't push yourself. So some easy, light, like cool down aerobic work post-workout. And then following the run or ride, sit in a sauna for 6 to 10 minutes. And then after the sauna, take an alternating cold and hot shower in the following sequence. Cold, hot, cold, hot, cold, cold for 30 seconds, and hot for 1 minute. So yeah, so he recommends to do some light cardiovascular work post-training to start the cool down process, and then jump in a sauna, and then do some alternating hot and cold showers. So what's funny about this is there's been a ton of research coming out lately on the benefits of the sauna and benefit on alternating cold and hot therapy. So yeah, I mean, he's kind of ahead of his time here on the research or on the recovery side of things. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I don't know if this is what he did himself, or this was maybe some stuff he got from the Bulgarians. I'm not sure. He doesn't really specify, which I'm surprised. I feel like if he got it from the Bulgarians, he would make sure he mentioned that, like he does with sunlight. Sunlight speeds recovery. The Bulgarians have discovered that ultraviolet light is extremely beneficial to recovery. So if you live in an area that is conducive to sunbathing, that would be the best source. If not, the next best source would be a tanning salon. So he recommends getting some sunlight, even going tanning. But I mean, shit, there's a lot of benefits to being in the sun. I think just getting more vitamin D is one side of it. But I just think being outside I will say this, like, during the summer months, the more I'm outside, I just feel better. Like, it could be a placebo effect. It could just be in my head, but I just feel like the more I'm outside, the more sunlight I get, the better I'm feeling. Last but not least, the importance of relaxation. The ability to relax after each Bulgarian Burst training session and stay in a relaxed state is vital if you want to get maximum progress from the program. So, yeah, relaxation. There's a lot to be said for just having less stress in your life. Like, man, I just think there's a lot to be said for living stress-free as much as possible. I mean, there's a funny story, but some of my best training ever was right after I graduated from college. I mean, right after college, like I said, I talked about earlier, I moved home. I had my own apartment. I was building my business when I was in college. Like, I was going to school full time. I was training hard. I was building my business. I was busy. Like, man, I was even, my last semester of college, I volunteered to do work with the research study that was going on at the exercise science department at my college, where we were researching hydration. I just wanted the experience of being a part of a research study, because at the time I didn't know if maybe I wanted to go on to maybe eventually do some research. So I wanted to do that. So my last semester of college was super, super demanding. And then when I graduated and moved home, got my own apartment, like I was living by myself. I was hanging out with my friends all the time. And all I had to do was work on my business. I was like, holy shit, like, this is all I have to do is work on my business and train. Like, I just felt like I had so much free time because my life was so busy for the previous 4 months or whatever. But at the time, I was just hanging out with my friends. Honestly, I was like partying like 4 nights a week, which isn't conducive to training at all. But that was like some of the best training I ever got. And I think a lot of it just had to do with having so much free time and living like as stress-free as possible. Like, I don't think you could come up with any less amount of stress than I had during that period of time. Like, business was doing good, so I was living by myself, had no responsibilities. Business was doing good. I was making more than enough money than I needed to support myself and save money and doing all the things I wanted to do. And, and I was only probably working like half days, really, because I had a lot of clients, but not, a full client roster or anything like I would have now. I was just, doing it. It was kind of still at that point like a side project. I was like, I'll just do this for the summer and see what happens. And shit, my training was amazing at that point. And I think a lot of it just had to do with low stress. I think there's a lot to be said for that. Last but not least, he talks a little bit about overtraining and how to recognize it. And what I wanted to talk about is he talks about taking your blood pressure and pulse daily. And this is good. I don't necessarily recommend the blood pressure thing. I think that's a little bit more intricate than we need. But checking your pulse daily in the morning is very beneficial. So to the book, a simple procedure that can be performed every morning soon after you wake up is to monitor your pulse. It's important that your blood pressure and pulse be taken at the same time every day, preferably first thing in the morning. If you discover your pulse is elevated, increased 8 to 10 beats per minute above your normal rate, we'll skip the blood pressure part, then reduce your training load by 50% that particular day. So only perform half the amount of sets you normally would do. So essentially what he's saying is, hey, if your pulse is higher in the morning than it normally is, that could be an early sign that you're overtraining. Reduce your training volume that day. So yeah, I mean, this is something that a lot of people do. They track their heart rate in the morning, or even track their heart rate variability in the morning. But you can also do a grip test or a finger tap test where you time yourself how many times you can tap your table in 60 seconds, or how many times you can use a hand gripper in 30 seconds, or things like that, just to kind of check your preparedness in the morning. It's not something I do a ton with myself or with clients, but it is a tool that you can keep in the back of your head if needed. But I think the easiest one here is just track your morning pulse. I mean, there's apps on your phone that can do it. Or you can just do it yourself. Just track your pulse first thing in the morning, and it'll just be another data point to track. And, I don't necessarily think you need to be super crazy about it, but again, it's another data point to track. And if there is some big time changes, like it's like way high one day, hey, it might be worthy to adjust your training. I mean, that's definitely something to consider. Next, he talks a little bit about active recovery training, and pretty much what he's talking about there is just throwing in a deload week if you feel you need it. We've talked a lot about deloads. I do think it's important to not wait until you feel like you absolutely need it. I mean, you don't want to just, I guess what I'm trying to say is don't wait until you've absolutely crushed yourself to then throw in a deload week, because then it's going to be kind of pointless. Kind of have deload weeks scheduled in advance when you think you'll need them. It's just better to kind of stay a little ahead of the curve there. And then he talks a little bit about how to accurately track your progress, but I mean, really that's about it. Just to kind of wrap things up, here's the conclusion. Then we'll finish this up. In summary, it's important to understand the 5 basic principles that make the Bulgarian Burst Training not only unique, but incredibly effective. Principle number 1, reduce your training session time to a maximum 35 to 40 minutes. Number 2, divide your daily workouts into 3 segments and spread them out throughout the day, so high frequency. Principle 3, vary the intensity level of your workouts throughout the week. Micro-periodization, or I would call it daily undulating periodization. Number 4, focus the intensity level and volume towards the specific goal you want, and don't waste your limited adaptive energy on non-productive intensity levels. So yeah, just pick your goal and then work towards that goal. Don't be all over the place. Principle number 5, work each body part 3 times a week instead of the more common once or twice per week programs. So these 5 principles, honestly, 3 through 4, vary the intensity levels of your workouts throughout the week. So that's daily undulating periodization. Focus the intensity and volume towards your goal, and then work each body part 3 times a week. I mean, honestly, 3 through 4 are pretty standard. That's a lot of what I program. The only thing that's really different about this, and really the whole book, really the 2 major points that's unique about this, is he recommends reducing your training sessions to 30 to 40 minutes and then dividing your workouts into 2 or 3 workouts a day. I mean, that's really what this is about, and that's really what makes it, quote unquote, the Bulgarian Burst Training Method. So that's the book. We pretty much read the whole damn book. Again, I wanted to do this one just because it's unique. I think a lot of you guys probably haven't heard of this book, probably have never read it before, haven't dug into it. You probably knew a little bit about the Bulgarian training system, and this is applied to bodybuilding, and it's unique. And at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff is kind of straightforward, but I thought it was interesting. I remember when I read it for the first time, I was like, damn, like that's a lot of the stuff made sense. But then I was like, man, I got caught up on the fact that, and I'm still, you got to understand, like, hey, the Bulgarians did their training program for Olympic weightlifting. 1, they were all on steroids. 1, all their training and nutrition and recovery and everything was optimized to the fullest. They had little stress, like they were professional athletes. And training for Olympic weightlifting. And I just think that a lot of people take those Bulgarian methods of 5 training sessions a day, maxing out 5 times a day and this and that. And they try to extrapolate that into powerlifting or extrapolate that into bodybuilding, and it doesn't really work. So me personally, when I look at something like this, I kind of take the idea of, it's a Bulgarian method. I just take that completely out of it. I just want to look at, okay, what's the meat and potatoes of the program? Like, what's the training variables? What's this? What's that? And at the end of the day, it's really not all that crazy. Like, you could take this workout program and probably just reduce the volume per session a little bit and then combine the 3 workouts a day into 1 or 2. And it would be a pretty, I would throw some different style of programming like in from a monthly standpoint. Like, he kind of just says it's kind of daily undulating periodization, but the way he writes it seems like it's pretty stagnant. Like, this is like, hey, this is the weekly program and you just do this. Like, that's kind of what the workout is. I would build in progressions week to week and progressions month to month, but shit, hey, I guess after reading this entire book, the one thing I would look at is, hey, maybe if you have the time and availability to try twice or splitting your workouts into two days a week or 2 sessions a day, it might be something to try. Is it practical for everybody? No, it's actually probably not practical for most people, but it might be worth a shot. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, guys, peace. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Absolute Strength Podcast. I know I had a ton of fun producing it for you. And before you go, if you could just drop me some feedback, I'd love it. I love reading your feedback. So you can go over to iTunes, leave a 5-star rating, write a little review, what you think of the podcast. I absolutely love it. I read every single one. But it's cool if you don't want to do that. I get it. No one wants to really go out of their way to do anything, let alone write a review. But I want to get your feedback. So drop me a line on Instagram at Hunt Fitness, or on Facebook, Kyle Hunt, or on Twitter, or send a pigeon or something. I don't know. I just want to hear your feedback. So if you want to give me some feedback, let me know what you think. Hit me up on Instagram at Hunt Fitness. And before you go, I have one last thing I want to say. I have a program I want you to check out. It's actually called the Absolute Strength Program, and the link is in the show notes. It's a program I designed to help increase my own squat, bench, and deadlift. And I got pretty strong off of it, and I think you're going to like it. It's a great book. Thousands of people have got amazing results from it. It's in the show notes. All right, guys. Until next time, until next episode, peace.